Oh, take that out.
Take that out.
That'll probably be funnier if you leave it in.
Could be.
Yeah, who knows?
You ready?
I thought we started a long time ago. My name is Joel Hansen. This is our garden. My wife Susan and I have spent 30 years building this. I don't know what else we would say about Joel besides the fact that I'm almost 60 years old. I can't imagine how I got past 21. As far as gardens go, this is the one that we made to be peaceful for us, and a place to relax and recharge. The promotional lighter that gets given away is probably because it really doesn't work. I was babbling. That's a first. Oh, the dichotomy between working in a saloon and doing this. And I think the reality is that saloon job wasn't about making burgers and pouring a drink. It was about the person in front of you who was either there to celebrate, commiserate, or they had a habit of being in a bar. Sometimes all three. I used to do taxes. One of the gals that was also doing taxes said to me, I hear that you teach confirmation and I hear that you work in a saloon. That's wrong. And I looked at her and I went, well, I'm pretty sure Jesus would say that there's a lot more chance to help and save somebody in the saloon than I am when I'm at church teaching confirmation. I mean, the lost souls are way over there. You know, they're not congregating over here with the ones that have realized that they needed this, you know. The ones who need to be shown how to live a gracious life at times are the ones that don't get it shown to them. A lot of people talk about how they're bartenders, they're therapists. It's almost like a confession. I don't know you. I can dump all of this crap out of my soul and out of my mind and out of my life and just kind of dump it. And so, you know, you listen a lot and you absorb a lot. You need to shed that somewhere. And I would say I've shed most of that here. You learn to enjoy the times when you're on the knees and pulling the weeds. It seems to be when I make my most changes often. It's my therapist right out there, right around that tree over there somewhere. You know, the energy of the earth is a real healing thing. And when I'm on my knees and pulling weeds, or even creating new beds where we take all the soil out and bring in all happy soil and make things smile, it not only feels like I'm healing myself, but, you know, we're healing the soil as well. One of my earliest memories of gardening would be gardening with my mother, vegetable gardening. She talked to the neighbor. We would go over and garden a little plot over there because we didn't have much of a lot in town in Forest Lake, be that as it may. We were talking about that. One of my mother's phrases, it would drive me crazy while she was alive. Now, of course, I use it all the time. But then on the other end, it's my father. And my father was a landscape designer in the summer times. He would take me occasionally. I think it would be days that my mother couldn't handle me anymore. And that's probably where I learned how to really, like, put a tree in the right place. I really enjoyed those times. Also, when I first fell in love with hamburgers, because we would go to Meister's on good days in Scandia and have, back then, the classic Meister burger with the shoestring potato fries. There was just something so special about that. I've always tried when I was working at Al's for all those years to make that burger that I had as a child at 7, 8, 9. I remember I gardened up at church. The gentleman would always say, what do we do about this area here? And I go, well, we put some flowers over here. You go, yeah, but the grass looks so terrible here. And I go, well, that's because of all the chemicals and all the stuff that you've dumped on this thing for all these years. There's no animals left in here. There's no worms. There's no beetles. There's no soil. You constantly have to put nitrogen down to make sure that it even stays green. I said, that would take years to repair, or you can dig the whole thing up and put in new. Or my recommendation would be to put some big, bright flowers over here, and then nobody will look at the grass. and you'll be looking at the flowers. And I said, sometimes I think for me, the garden's about a distraction. How do I avert myself from the parts that we haven't finished and the parts where we pile up all the junk so that I look over here, and I think that's life a bit too. I think the other one is, my dear wife and I do it together. It's one of those places where we really meet. We used to go on garden tours all the time, and before we had a house, we used to go to the Minnesota Landscape Arboretum, and we would go every season so that we could see what it is that we liked. But again, this was one of the places, that was a lovely date for us. Other people go clubbing, other people go to Disney World, other people go, around the world. We tend to stay right here and put our energy and our joy into our garden that we get to see.
So what attracts you to grow certain plants versus other plants?
Whatever my wife says.
Do you have favorites?
I have some favorites. The varieties of hostas that we have, which is close to about 40 of the perhaps 300 plants on the yard, they're easy to grow. And they split and you can share them really quick. And I like that part about them. They put out an interesting flower, and then there's into all there's like 6,000 varieties of hostas, and then you start getting into the patterns. And you got the green on the inside and the yellows. For years I was buying yellows, and then for years I was buying blues, and then I was buying greens with blues and yellows. And I think I used to charge myself a dime for every time I said and I'd be up to about $20 today. Susan's absolute favorites are the Astilbe, which are in pretty good bloom right now. I like a water element, and that's not a plant, but one of our main goals here is a butterfly and hummingbird garden. And when we have a butterfly visiting, when there's people over, I just kind of stop and watch, and they're going, we were talking about this. I go, yeah, but there's a butterfly, because that's what this garden's for. And then Susan's other absolute favorite is daylilies, which are an interesting flower because they put out sometimes the best, most glorious display today, but tomorrow that's not there. And there's this real connection then to the circle of life that, boom, gorgeous bloom, boom, ugly deadhead. Because of its chaos and beauty, I think it brings out the poetry of nature, which is good enough. And of course, if I ever struggle with any of that, I just recite Dylan Thomas in the back of my head in the voice of Iggy Pop.
What would you say to somebody who's never gardened?
Sorry. It's that old adage of how do you pass along an experience that's important to you to someone who's not doing and or willing to do it. That's about viewpoint. And there's something we don't work on very well these days, is understanding someone else's viewpoint and maybe why it is important to them. It reminds me of the bus ride. I used to play a Barry saxophone, so can you imagine getting on a bus and the bus driver didn't always like how much effort it took for me to get into the bus and would often say things that were less than beneficial. And my mother, when I finally said something about it, said to me, well, Joel, there's a real good chance that the bus driver doesn't know how to communicate any other way. And I think that goes to your question of what do you say to somebody who's never gardened or doesn't garden. Well, they've just never really been shown a way that it would work for them. So I guess my question would be, did you never get a chance? But I think I would probably have to say I'm sorry.
If you had to give a nugget of gardening advice, what would it be?
Prep your soil.
That's the biggest one. Dig your soil down and find out what's going on in there, and if it needs to be changed, amend it.
That's why these beds are glorious, is because we've prepared the soil, where it's going to grow. And I guess the other biggest advice would be don't plant things that other people tell you to plant. Plant things you like. Plant flowers that you want. We've had a couple of goals. Those help, but don't let it run and change what you want to do. I mean, if you want the garden to be this way, well, then make it that way. Read a lot of books, see a lot of gardens, go to other gardens. I mean, this is not the garden we had when we had 2-year-olds. Now, that one was an open grass area with a big playground. I think your priorities change, and that's a challenge for gardeners who, are raising children or doing a full-time job. Susan would say in the 90s when I would come home from the .coms, I'd just come home and just down on my knees and start pulling something, because that was half the challenge was just getting out and doing it. I think the challenges we turn into opportunities. We're at a couple weeks, well, I want to say 1 week away from peak. We kept saying that it was going to happen right now, but it's been such a strange year. Every year's different, so that's one of the cool things about gardening, but yet everything still happens. You can't always say it's going to be on April 12th or May 10th, or I used April 12th because that apricot tree there has been in full bloom on April 12th. That's one of the earliest blooming trees in Minnesota, and that happens to be my mother's birthday. I think that's one of the big routine things about the garden is both new things that you put into it and traditional things. Everything's got a memory of why you put it there, maybe when you put it there. It isn't that you willy-nilly picked out a $40 plant and decided to put it in the ground and hope that it didn't die. Flowers give a lot of joy, and I'm about bringing joy into people's lives if that's possible. I think that's why I garden. Plus, it keeps me sane. It's a lot cheaper than a psychologist.